So examiners, and welcome to part 2 of a series on how to answer a literature analysis question for the OCR Latin GCSE board. This one is based on how to understand the text and how to find some actual points to discuss. Again, this is not a real text. I wrote this, there are mistakes, it's a bit clunky. However, I'm hoping that it kind of looks like a real thing. This concept of the writing a scene to describe how news is received is quite common. Livy does one when Hannibal's victory at Lake Trasimene reaches them. And he's got this scene about like a load of women at the gate waiting for news, and they're sort of crying or being happy in equal turns depending on what news they get. Most of them are crying. There's a lot of inspiring speeches, very common. So let's pretend, for the sake of argument, this is something that Livy wrote about an event during the Second Punic War, because most of us should know something about Hannibal. So we know the sort of setting, the context that's going on. So our hero, Achilles, he sees the people are worried, are fearing, they're thinking about fleeing Rome and giving up entirely. He steps up and he delivers the speech. For the sake of sanity, I am going to refer to the author as Pseudo-Livy, because otherwise it's going to get very difficult with the personal pronouns. The first thing you always need to do is, what's the point of this? What is the point of Fortes ad bellum? What is the theme? I mean, one theme can be the bravery and effectiveness of Achilles. He persuades the Romans to keep going. Other themes could be a sort of a broader thing about the Romans as a whole, how tough and resilient they are, or about how dangerous Hannibal was. Livy also likes to throw in the exemplum, a Roman moral, an example of how Roman citizens should act or shouldn't act, depending on the moral in place. Yeah, I don't know. This is from an Excel file that I gave to my students, but you can hit so it's just my definitions. There are a lot of rhetorical terms. You don't need to use rhetorical terms. They are not actually, strictly speaking, necessary, but they can be short form. So rather than explaining what polysyndeton or tricolon is, you can just use the word. But you can just explain the terms. So I will be using the terms here, but probably explain them also somewhat. So for this first chunk, we might talk about the connotations of clade. Clade, disaster, is a very negative word. First in the sentence really hits out straight away. Maximo is a superlative. You can almost always talk about superlatives, because it's not just terror, it's very big terror. But, you know, terror is also quite negative in and of itself. Now we have this asyndetic tricolon. So all types of different women are weeping. Possibly you could also argue about the polyptoton. Polyptoton is where you've got the repetition of the root concept of a word. So here between daughters and sons, sort of bookending the sentence somewhat. Then we have a nice bit of contrast. It's not only, but also, not only stupid people, but even the very brave. Not just the brave, but the very brave. So again, we have this superlative we can talk about. And then here we've got the connotations of res publica, the Roman state. It is a republic, it's not ruled by a monarchy. The Romans are very pleased about that, so they're worried that it's lost. That's obviously quite bad. Connotations of de superi, sort of the positiveness of the gods above. But in here, it's a negative thing, because they've abandoned them, just as the res publica should be a positive, but they're worried it's lost. You could also perhaps talk about the sibilants, maybe sort of the gods above are slipping away from them. So overall, this short section is clearly emphasizing the fear, the terror, the distress of the Republic before Achilles does something. Next section. Here, one man. Well, that's pretty obvious sort of emphasis going right at the first. Technically speaking, is it really even necessary to say one man did this? Couldn't you just say Achilles did this? Ausonii is a sort of a poetic form of the word italici. It's obviously describing virtue, courage. This is a Roman virtue that they would hold very closely to their heart. So this is kind of creating this feel of Achilles being a sort of epic hero. He's filled with ancient heroic courage. And then he speaks from the rostra. The rostra isn't just a speaker's platform, it's this speaker's platform. It was decorated with a series of rostrum, so in the plural rostra, which are the ships, the prows of ships. The Romans won a sea battle, I think, and took the prows off of it and basically decorated their speaker's platform with this. So not only is this a really clear image of exactly where Achilles is speaking from, it's also like a famous allusion to a Roman battle. Finally, we get here obvious alliteration of the V's. Senatores vocatis verbis vellivolis. Really very strong. Vocatos, sorry. There's also possibly a reference here with vellivolis. In the Iliad and the Odyssey, characters are often speak to each other with winged words. Now, the word for winged is literally like of a wing. The Latin equivalent to that would be alata, which is, in Latin translations of the Iliad, annoyingly what they actually use. I've used Pseudo-Livy has used vellivolis here because of the clear alliteration, but also, like, it's still kind of sail-flying words, it's still a little bit there, but also it works quite nicely with the rostra, which is decorated with ships' prows. So sort of nice reference there going on. So overall, very clear image of Achilles sort of stepping up alone. He's the only one who is still brave. He is giving this heroic, persuasive address. Now we have this anaphoric tricolon, set of 3 rhetorical questions. Surely you, da da da. Surely you, da da da. Surely you, da da da. But the negative as well, because it's surely you don't want to do this. Personal pronouns here are quite noticeable. You could also talk about, which I don't think I've emphasised, the fact that it's vostrum, your people. So was, vostrum, was. And then the next line will indeed have vobis in it as well, so it's really emphasising that. We've got the negative connotations of flight, fleeing from Rome. I could have mentioned, and I haven't, the fact that patres are actually directly spoken to. Oh, there you go. Choice of vostrum, but it's juxtaposed to kaide. The idea that it's your people being cut down, slaughtered. Very negative word is kaide. Hesperia, like Ausonia, it's basically an epic word for Italy. It comes up a lot, as I say, in the Iliad, that is the land to the west. Maybe a little bit of alliteration with hostibus Hesperiae, but much clearer alliteration with caput corque conceditis. Very, very harsh sounds, because Achilles is accusing the senators of surrendering the heart and head of Italy. So, obvious metaphor there. So, real attack straight out the gate by Achilles against the shameful actions of the senators, or the shameful potential action of the senators. No, I say to you, no! Really, really strong. Minime is a superlative adverb, but can be translated as the word no, but it will also be translated as like not at all. Again, we've got that vobis, that personal pronoun. And then we've got a slightly more complicated point. This is a chiasmus, where the order is sort of mirrored around the centre point. So the order is nothing, nihil, Rome, senatum populumque Romanum, will conquer. Will conquer, Roman stuff, nothing. So it's a real, adds a lot of emphasis to the nothing will conquer Rome, no one will conquer Rome. It's also a nice obvious reference to the Senatus Populusque Romanus, very, very common phrase in Roman monuments and speeches. It exemplifies Rome. So the idea that the Romans are giving up on this SPQR, it would be bad. And finally, we've got yet another word in Latia for Romans. So this is an interesting process of using many different words over a passage to refer to the same thing, which is veratio. Comes up more in sort of rhetorical speeches, but then again, this is a rhetorical speech. Then we have the hyperbole. I would more gladly suffer 1,000 deaths. This is also something known as zeugma, where you have two different, where a single word is used in two different senses. Here, perpetiar literally does mean like undergo. It's got even perpetiar to really emphasize it's not just patio, I suffer, but it's perpetior, I all the way suffer through. So literally suffering deaths, but also like allowing the destruction of the temple. As I say, this is a little bit polypston because we've got suffering, allowing a couple of times being mentioned. Then we have the illusion. The temple of Jupiter the Stayer was vowed by Romulus if the Romans didn't flee from the battle. So Caecilius is using that idea that, like, look, you need to stay just as the Romans stayed for Romulus. And finally, we've got the imperatives at the end, really sort of hammering home the order. Go out and call brave men to war. So positive connotations of brave there. Like they need to go. Possibly you could even emphasise that repetition from the very brave men were fearing in the first bit to the idea that brave men are going to war now. And finally, bellum, delayed all the end of the speech. Brave men to war. That's where brave men go to. They don't flee, they go to war. So overall, Caecilius here is answering his own rhetorical questions, he is extolling Roman bravery, and he is ordering the senators to go to war. And so, yeah, the SPQR, really key concept in Rome, and the temple of Jupiter the Stayer was quite a famous sort of temple for the Romans. So the idea of abandoning either SPQR or the temple of Jupiter the Stayer would not go well for the Romans. Thank you very much.